Testing? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Executive Think Tank panel, Building the Future of Live Experiences and Entertainment. My name is Peyton Bhatia, and I'm the Director for Business Development for Tate MENA. And I bring to you an amazing panel today who have so much experience both globally and locally. And without further ado, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Angela Selkirk. I work for King Salman Park.
Can everybody hear okay? I can barely, okay, very good. My name's Chris Perry. I work for Qiddiya.
Matt Richmond. I am VP of Global Projects for Tate.
I'm Mohammed Husseini. I work at Tate as an Executive Creative Director.
And I'm Amin Rashmani. I'm the Managing Director for Tate in the Middle East.
I gotta say, Matt and Chris know how to use the mic well. I think we're all learning otherwise. All right, so for the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to ask our panelists a bunch of questions, and we'll have the last 10 minutes for audience question and answers. So I'll kick it off. My first question is to Angela and to Mo. What kind of key trends and technologies do you see shaping the future of live experiences and entertainment? And how is your team adapting to these changes?
All right, I'll go. I would say that it's the incredible investment in human capital. That is something that in our industry we haven't seen in a long time, and now all I seem to hear is panel talks where we're discussing robust training, where we're really applying industry best practice and standards into our training processes for the young people who are starting out in the industry. And I think the application of credentialing is really, really important. You know, Toyota used to give basically a university level degree for every year you worked at the organization. And by building brand trust, you will reduce your attrition in the organizations. You're going to really be able to, you know, build the capacity in a true and authentic way, and it becomes a profession now, not an ad hoc thing that you might have just jumped into. So I think with what the Saudi Entertainment and Amusement Academy, what the HRDF fund is here for, is really to apply best practice to the standards, increased standards in the industry. So for me, what's new and innovative in my industry is that this has not been a topic of discussion for many years, and now it seems to be a really hot trend, and I'm very, very proud of that.
I think for me, the things that are really interesting generally have a lot to do with data and how we use it to build and design events and experiences. I think we're getting to a really interesting place in the world in general in terms of being able to sense and understand what people are doing, and when you start to add things like AGI into that, being able to look at intentions and what people are looking for, I think from the standpoint of experience design, you start to get to what I've always called kind of the holy grail, which is the ability to build an experience for the masses that still feels personalized and special to you as an individual, right? For us as organizers to be able to build and deploy at scale while still creating an experience that feels incredibly personal and resonant for the person that's a part of it. I think that sensing technologies, the ability to process that data, and what that means and how that complicates design is really interesting to me. I think that there's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to figure out. I don't know that anybody's that I've seen has necessarily got those answers, but I think you certainly see the beginnings of it, especially in themed entertainment, in some places, in kind of destinations and stuff like that. But that stuff really excites me, and I think it pushes us to a really interesting place.
Absolutely. Hyper-personalization. Agree with you there. All right, Matt, you've delivered several projects in the last half decade, right? So to ask you a question, how do you iterate and evolve experiences year over year to keep them fresh and resonant?
I think that's a beautiful part about working here is that I sit around in a room and everybody tosses an idea on the table, and as soon as somebody says, "Oh no, that's way too crazy, that's impossible, we could never do that," is the minute I say, "Perfect, that's the one we're going to do, and that's the one we're going to figure out, and that's the one that we're going to push forward with." All jokes aside, those exact conversations have happened more than a few times in the last few years that I've been here, and they have been extremely successful for us with creating guest experiences that have been second to none, and has kept everything moving. And I will continue to look for someone who is going to say, "I'd like to do this," and someone else to say, "That's way too crazy," and for me to say, "Perfect."
Fantastic. Can you give us some experiences on how projects have really evolved year over year in some of the projects you've done?
Sure. So an example of that would be I work on a project called Soundstorm Music Festival here just north of the city. And after we did it year one, it was a desire to create a higher level VIP experience. And at one point I was sketching out some ideas of how to kind of move VIPs around the site in a way that hadn't been done before. And at the same time, our chairman and CEO were having some conversations. And what came back was like, hey, we were having some conversations. What came back would be like, wouldn't it be really great if we could just have a set of walkways around the entire site that was elevated, and our VIPs could just walk from one stage to another and never go along the ground. And what they told me is like, but that's what someone said, and then we told them that was too crazy, Matt. We were looking out for you. We told them it was going to too crazy. You wouldn't need to do that. And I said, great, that's what we'll do. And 6 months later, that's what we did, and we built 2.5 kilometers of walkways, and you transcend the entire site now at 5 meters above the ground. And I think that's a prime example of that, and we'll continue down that road. And someone told me we couldn't build a stage in 3 months that was world class and at that size, and I said, great, we'll build a stage in the next 3 months that was world class and at that size.
Fantastic. I can see Chris smiling away too. I suppose you agree, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I also believe in that innovation is you also created a new visitor experience and a new way of actually observing a show. So I think that's really, really cool that you've got a lot of benefit out of that.
For sure.
All right, Mo. As creative director, I would love for you to answer, how does creativity play a role in making sure you keep engaging your audiences?
Yikes. Look, I think everything to do with creativity and design happens before creativity and design. And what I mean by that is, I think the source of what creative is about delving in and trying to understand the audience and what they need. I think that a lot of the time the way people do design is lists of cool things. Here's a bunch of cool things we can do. And they're not always looking at and trying to understand the audience before they do that. And that, I think, is where you see things fail and not connect with people despite being really cool. One man's stupid is another man's cool is one way that I like to think about it. And I think that when you are trying to design something, when you are trying to be creative about something, I always go to this point of trying to first understand the problem, right? What is it that we're trying to say? What is it that we're trying to do? And then really understand the audience. Because when you're trying to solve a problem, essentially what you're trying to do is you're trying to create a change in people. That can be a really simple change, right? Like you can just say, I want people to be really entertained and spend a great day doing whatever it is that you're designing. Sometimes that can be a really complicated change. You may be trying to get a technical message across when you're working with some clients. You might be trying to tell a brand story of some kind. You really have to kind of dig down and get into understanding A, what they're trying to say, B, what the audience already believes about what they're trying to say, and see how do you get them from A to B, right? That's when the creativity comes in. That you've understood the problem, you've understood the people, and now you can start to design interesting, innovative, and new ways to move people from that position of where they want to be to where that, from that position of where they are to where you're trying to get them. So that's where the creativity to me comes in. And I know it sounds really boring to say that like you got to do a lot of research and get into a lot of strategy, because I think people would much rather think of creativity as a bunch of knuckleheads sitting around trying to come up with cool things. And it's hopefully a little more complicated than that. What? Okay, it's true. Actually, that's all we do. We sit around and play Xbox all day.
Absolutely. Thank you. So going into like all the research and data, Chris, this is a question for you, right? So what surprising insight about your audience and your guests have you gained from your past recent projects? I know you said you've been around for 17 years in the region, so tons of experience there. Would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, I think I approach it probably a little bit differently from the rest of the group, because I don't work in the live entertainment business. I actually work in the park business. And our parks oftentimes have live experiences, but I have been to Middle Beast. Our parks have live experiences, and we're creating the live experiences. And I think one of the things that has been the biggest takeaway for us, particularly here in the region, is about understanding the market. We can sit back, being in the industry for a long time, and think we know everything. We can sit around as a bunch of creative knuckleheads, which I am as well. I just missed the creative part, but I work in entertainment strategy. And so we work with a lot of consultants, and what we end up doing is testing what we want to do. If we have a certain demographic that we want to attract, we will design an experience for them, but then we will go out and test this in a consumer group. And I can't say how much that has benefited us. When you start talking about the VIP experience and we start talking about our VIP experiences, we're testing this and we're being told they want to be part of the experience. We haven't done this before, and so it's pushing us down paths if we never asked about it that we wouldn't have gone down, because we think we knew everything, or our past has told us what we should do previously. And a lot of times that works, but depending upon the demographic and the spending power, there are things that they want that when you're starting from scratch, you can actually execute. But you have to ask them and you have to listen.
So how much of the testing that you're currently doing focuses on the audiences that your projects will eventually serve? Is this all done in Saudi, in the MENA market?
So our process that we follow is starting at ground up feasibility. If we're going to design something, it's got to be based around numbers. And you either believe in the numbers here or you don't, right? People can throw stones all the time at the vision, but if you're here working, you have to trust the numbers that are there, and then we will design around those. But we don't just take numbers, we also build them from the ground up with consultants who have done this not just in this market, but many markets. So they're able to talk about penetration rates. And so once we have these and we start designing experiences, we know what our segments are, who we're trying to attract, and once we have concepts, we go test them with our segments. So we know the segments that we're going after, we have concepts, we want to hear from our groups, the people who will eventually come to our parks and experience not just attractions, but also live events. What do they want to see? Here is what we're showing, but we'll ask if we could improve this, what would they like to see? If they could change one thing and they're the designer, what would they do? These are the types of questions that we're asking and we're listening. And what we're hearing a lot of is about them being involved, right? Creating exclusive experiences that they have not seen in other places. And the market is educated. This market travels. They have been to other places. And so that's the information that we're gathering.
Thank you for that little bit of a tidbit. That's fascinating. Next question, Amin. Can you share an example with us of how you've successfully engaged audiences uniquely and innovatively?
Um, well, I'm a big believer in general that any type of experience that you closer. Okay. I'm a big believer in general that any type of experience that you create not only has to wow, but it really has to change your expectation from or any preconceptions that you had coming into that experience. And if your preconception changes, then pretty much that's what's going to resonate. Because if you get just a big wow, it's a big wow, and then there's the next big wow. But the ones you actually remember is that. And I think one of the favorite example that I have is actually on a museum project that we've done. It's the Richard Nixon Library in Yorba Linda, California. And for those of you who have ever visited a presidential library in the States, it really goes through a chronological order of their life, their upbringing and then their career and then what they've accomplished. And one of the biggest challenges in that project was working with the National Archives Foundation and the Richard Nixon Foundation, and Richard Nixon being a Republican and California being a Democratic state. How do you actually tackle this? And obviously Watergate, because when you hear Richard Nixon, it's Watergate. So what do we do with that? As a general thought process we have internally is we design all of our experiences in the base, especially when it comes to museum contents, with feelers, swimmers, and divers. And so the feelers are the ones that just want to feel the whole experience, want to go through it quickly. The swimmers are the ones that want to read a little bit more content. And the divers are those to read every single little specific detail. And so one, you have to cater to that in general. At the same time, it's really about, okay, how do you tackle this subject? And one of the things that really resonated with me and many people that I've actually asked who have visited this place is that, okay, everybody knows Watergate scandal, let's put that up front, and that's the first thing you see. Then suddenly you immediately in the Oval Office kind of inviting you to forget about your preconceptions as to what we've done. You sit as the president and then you're completely submersed into the things that were happening around the world as you took office. So kind of breaks that barrier immediately, and then you start learning, okay, what he did to improve women's rights, how did he, increased, the trade with China, and how he worked with Russia to bridge that relationship. And then you start forgetting about Watergate, and then suddenly you think it's finished, and then you realize you're in the place that he's born, so authenticity then becomes important. Then you learn about his upbringing, and then the experience finishes with him being on a flight, being, leaving the office, and then you start bringing it about. So for me, it's taking a context of something typical about a chronological order. You're going to learn about something, changing the perspective of the audience, and then putting them in their shoes, and regardless of what kind of preconceptions you have, at the end of the day, you leave making your own determination of how that resonated with you. If we do this on all of the type of experiences we have, it would create that moment that you'll never really forget going forward.
Having been to that museum, I will agree, it's a genre-breaking experience. It doesn't feel like a museum. It's not, the way typically museums are. So thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
If I can just jump in quickly, I think that's a really important point that Amin is making to hit home of this idea of playing against expectation, of surprising people and rewarding them with things that they really oh my God, I didn't realize that. Being able to change a preconception through something that we are doing and designing, I think fundamentally that becomes the gold standard, right?
All right, so Matt, we've heard about feasibility, we've heard about breaking preconceptions. We'd love to hear what you think about the audiences in MENA and how they interact differently from other audiences around the world. We know the UK audiences react very differently from the Japanese audiences. We'd love to hear more specifically about the MENA market from your perspective.
I think, in my opinion, one word sums up audiences, and that's passion. I think we see a much higher level of passion and audience engagement here than we do in other parts of the world. I think we also see a much more knowledgeable audience member around what they're interested in. So if you're interested in music and you're coming to a music event, you are, I believe, much more knowledgeable on average as an audience member here than we see in other places. So a little bit, there's no pulling the wool over anybody's eyes, if you will, and that saying. And it forces us to be a little bit more in our game to ensure that we're actually taking our experience to another level that still engages them at a higher level than we see in other places. And I think that's probably what I see the most out of the audiences here, which is really exciting, by the way, because you have this passion at your events or at your site or whatever they're doing that is, it's unparalleled anywhere else, and that's wonderful because we're all here just to make people smile, right, and enjoy their day and have a fun time with us. And when you see that passion, you see that coming out at the end, it's fantastic.
Chris, having literally operated in the region for several years and decades even, would you like to add to that answer about MENA audiences?
It's interesting because I think the MENA audience in an, I don't want to say an undeveloped market, but when you're breaking ground doing the first of some things, there's a lot of leeway at the beginning. Traffic, parking, bathrooms, food and beverage. There's an understanding that it's going to be busy, but we're going to go anyway because there's not a ton to do. There's going to be a lot to do, right? And people are going to be able to make choices, and they're going to have choices in the future. And so this market is going to be educated probably all at the same time, and they're going to start being able to be selective. And so the organization, how you manage crowds, the guest service that's given, it's not just going to be, this is the only game in town. This market's going to educate very quickly. And so a lot of our efforts are on, first of all, making the experience spectacular. And the experience starts when they make a decision to come. And so we want them talking about it when they leave, but that's a curated experience, not just from the creative knuckleheads about the live event, but it's about getting there, the signage, the parking, where the restrooms are. Do you have enough? Have you managed the crowds well so that they talk about it and they'll go back to every event you ever do because you've done it well?
I could talk all day about toilets.
And Chris, I can listen to you all day.
I'm going to ask like an extended version of this question to you because I know you've operated in the UAE market for a long time and now you're coming into Saudi to kind of expand the team over here. Is there a difference within the MENA market and how the audiences really engage? Do you see that living your everyday?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we oftentimes make is we define MENA as the same across the board, and it is not. It's certainly not. It is different in Saudi than it is in the UAE. It is different within Saudi as well. It is different so understanding this is extremely important. I think at the end of the day, everybody goes somewhere to, let me back up. Somebody once told me that our biggest challenge as a company is your own personal home couch, right? So how do we get you out of your couch from your Xbox, right, to come to a destination? What kind of expectations, right? You have personal expectations, but you're really going to share that experience with somebody else, right? It's important to understand what does sharing that experience mean for a tourist that's coming in that has only a couple of days, or a resident that wants to constantly keep going, whether that being it here in the UAE or whether it's local, regardless of your demographics, regardless of your religion. Every type of guest needs to be certainly analyzed, and any kind of destination that that resonates actually needs to cater to those. So for us, really important for us to understand and have and engage with local vendors, local cultures, local team. Specifically, I don't want to say MENA team, it's really local from the areas in which we're operating, so we don't make that mistake, so we then cater to that. And then obviously the international market is the international market. At the end of the day, what's going to make them choose your destination over the million other things that you need to do? That's kind of the same worldwide.
Absolutely. And Angela, I know you've worked in the UAE in the past as well, and you're now in Saudi. So I would love to kind of hear your thoughts about solutions, right? So sometimes we kind of face problems, all shapes and sizes, right? Has there ever been a time when you've operated in this region where like a really complex problem was potentially solved with a very simple solution?
Yeah, so yes, actually, I'm going to give you a complicated answer for something very simple. You know, when I first joined the live entertainment sector, one of the things that I noticed really quickly was that you could pay the same ticket price and go to a 20,000 person concert, and there would be people who were sat at the, you know, at the back, behind the front of house control, on the lawn, as far away as you could get. And then there were other people who were choosing to be part of a hot mess, you know, bumping up against each other, you know, they want to get as close as they can. And I remember watching this and thinking, wow, you both paid the same ticket price, but you've done a very different experience, and you've chosen that. And so for me, the simple solution were what we ran into, fast forward to a mega event that we ran in Dubai, is that we were faced constantly with, you know, tens of thousands of people coming to a very small venue, very small venue, 5,000 square meters. And so we were constantly trying to deal with how do we manage these crowds. We don't even know how many are coming to us every day. It was all different demographics, so we really just didn't know. So we planned, and then we planned again, and then we over-planned. And we built queues, we built fences, we put in barriers for queues, barriers for perimeter, barriers for something else. And what are the first things that we learned? One, out here people eat barriers for breakfast, which is very true. Let's just be honest, right? What does it do? And the more that the barriers are there, the more you want to get past the barriers, because it feels like you're being restricted from something. And I myself have lived in the region for 15 years, and I can tell you if I see a barrier, I want to get around it. So as an operational planner, why on earth did I think that would work? So we had a lot of crowds coming our way, and we started to fence them into pens and boxes and all sorts of stuff, and it didn't work. So the simplest solution was to remove it. And they self-regulated, and they had a better experience, and they chose their own adventure. And the thing about the entertainment sector is that it's a combination, it's a weird juxtaposition between a choose your own adventure, which is, as I mentioned before, and this whole identity of an effervescent collective. We're all we're like bubbles rising to the top. Without each other, we don't make an event. I've had major bands, really big bands, who refused to go on stage until they felt that there was an audience to be there, because they fed off the audience, and the audience fed off them. And that is really, really important to understand, that you've got that juxtaposition. You have to allow a little bit of freedom. And so for us, it was just removing the barriers and allowing them to self-regulate. So,
Love that. Remove the barriers.
I'm not recommending that in all situations.
Okay. Be honest. All right, so in terms of like just building partnerships as we kind of go about, you know, building this industry and building the future of live experiences and entertainment, Matt, how do collaborators and partnerships enhance the experiences that we create at the end of the day? And can you give us a couple of examples on how that has kind of panned out in the projects you've done?
Sure. I think as much as any one of us in this room would like to say, I can do it all, we can't, right? None of us can do it all. And none of us will ever be able to do it all. And so collaboration and partnerships is just at the heart of doing anything. And that's just a foundational base layer to go from. I firmly believe in, creating the round table, creating the input from all different people, and having that input then work its way through an organic and natural process to come to an end product, which I think in almost every single case is a much stronger product than if you just have one individual go forward with an idea. And I think that collaboration isn't necessarily with, a vendor collaborating with a client, or a client collaborating with a vendor, or like-minded individuals in an industry. I think that collaboration takes every single aspect of a relationship with any number of individuals. And I think the more diverse you get in that collaboration, the stronger your output at the end of the day is going to be. And I'm a huge proponent, and we've tried to do this as much as we can with the projects that we work on, is get that diversity of collaboration. Really say, okay, yeah, sure, we have always done lighting, and we have always done sound, and we've always done staging for concerts for 20 years. Great. Who's the lighting person who hasn't never done a concert before? Who's the person who has never built a stage for a concert before? And come to the table with your point of view and collaborate with that. And I think that when you get that diversity, it's extremely important to creating. You were talking earlier, like how do you keep people fresh and new and stuff like that. And I think it's that diversity of opinion and idea coming together. The second part for me around collaboration is around the yin and the yang, and everybody has one side and somebody else has another side. And when you can put those two sides together, and then you can get them to work together in a collaborative manner, and you bring skill set A with skill set B, and attitude A with attitude B, and you put that together. And while they're going to clash because they're opposite and they're not going to think the same, that's what you really want, is them not to be thinking the same, and then to spin around and have a little tension and have a little love, and at the end of it, what comes out of it is wonderful. And so when you talk about collaboration, it's let's collaborate, and let's collaborate with someone who I don't know, who isn't from the same world that I'm from, to bring something together. And if you want an example of that, I'll just go back to Soundstorm because it's easy. Is it after year one, we had some traffic challenges, to say the least.
I wasn't using you as an example. I was just saying in general.
But those examples existed, and we needed to overcome them. And so once again, we're like, okay, well, all of the conventional, to be honest, numbers and data said that we could not drive that number of cars to the site. And I collaborated with some people who looked at construction from a different manner than I had looked at construction. And sure enough, we were able to build some roads through the desert and build some parking lots. And we were able to overcome that traffic. And the only way we did that is because I was working with someone who had a completely and totally different attitude towards construction than I had grown up with and knew to understand.
They hired the Chick-fil-A drive-through teams and brought them out. If you've never been to Chick-fil-A, they can process drive-through like nobody else in the world. They're unbelievable.
Simple solutions to complex problems, right? All right, last question here. I mean, you've got a minute to answer this because we're running a little behind schedule, but what is your vision for live experiences in the Middle East? And how do you see your projects influencing this vision?
I think we're in the right place at the right time. I think it's the passion that was referenced is not only for the goers, right? It's really for building an industry at the forefront of the world and pioneering this. It's been happening here for a while. It's exponential right now. It's happening a lot on the live events. It's happening a lot in the design of all these fixed assets that are taking place, but they're going to start becoming under construction. And this industry is certainly on the rise. So our vision is to, considering the level of investment that's taken place, that in collaboration with talent, international and local, is going to foster innovation. And considering that we are in the business of creating innovation, our vision is to foster this as much as possible going forward. And that is by providing our expertise, by partnering with local talent, by growing our presence here. That's really my 1 minute response. I can go on forever, but.
Well, we've got 4.5 minutes, so I'll turn it over to the audiences. If you have any questions for our panelists, we'd love to hear them now.
Hi, hello. Yeah, that's working. So, in the experiences you guys are driving, whether it be an event or a fixed installation, you're clearly one of the best in the world at doing these things. How key is it linking now a physical experience with a digital experience?
Absolutely critical. I think life is hybrid. I mean, it's hybrid for all of us. We walked in today, everyone's getting QR codes scanned everywhere. It's how you get your food. It is a thread that is embedded in every part of your life. And I think that as a designer, as a creative, as a producer, if you're not at least thinking about it and making conscious decisions about why or why, I mean, you can not include digital, but it needs to be a thoughtful non-inclusion, if that makes sense. I think it's such a critical part of the experience for people now that ignoring it and not being thoughtful about it is malpractice on some level.
I think that the digital aspect gives us all the ability, and the creative team the ability to personalize the experience, unlike only having the physical side. And I think that's where the industry is going from an event user experience. And so being able to personalize that to the nth degree as we continue to go forward with technology is what's going to be key for a patron and for an event organizer or operator.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Any other questions? You still have 2 minutes.
So I could have made my response longer.
Well, if there are no other questions, well, thank you so much for attending our panel. We will be at our booth, which is just a couple steps away. Please feel free to stop by, say hello, have a personal one-on-one chat with the panelists as well. Thank you so much.